Conscious living is when you understand the laws of nature and use those laws to create your life on purpose, as opposed to living by default. The way we were meant to live is abundantly, healthy bodies, freedom to choose, to grow and to learn, and to become a better version of ourselves. This is how we should be living 90 to 95% of the time. But unfortunately, 95% of the people are not living like this. They are living by default. And unfortunately, we were trained out of this natural way of living from birth. This next clip I'll show you is how manifestation happens from the vibrational world going into the physical world. Okay, let's get started. The green arrow is pointed towards the node where it says Vortex of Desires. Vortex of Desires is a storehouse, for lack of a better word, that you've been storing all these desires from many lifetimes and including this lifetime. These are the things that you want to happen, that you wish to happen in your life. It could be that you want to be a millionaire, or you want to have this great relationship, or you want to be a famous singer, etc. From your desires, everything gets organized. What that means is everything is set up for you, so when you get this inspired thought, you'll know where to go and what to do. In another video, I'll explain how this node of organization works. I'll go into detail on how all that happens. I can't do that here because otherwise this video would be way too long if I explain how each node worked. So I'll have separate videos on each node. Now your desires are traveling into the belief system. Your desires have to go through your belief system in order for it to manifest. So here's where the problem starts. Let's say you want $100,000, but your belief system doesn't believe it. Or you want this amazing relationship, but your belief system says, I don't deserve it. This is where people get stuck, and there's no way around this belief system. Everything has to filter through that belief system first. I'll make another video on how you can change your belief system. But in this diagram, this person here is living consciously. So what that means is their desires and their belief systems are in sync. They're matching. These vibrations are now turning into a thought. This is the very beginning of physical manifestation. You have to remember that thoughts are different than thinking. Thinking is more in a realm of analyzing and researching. A thought, when it comes, it happens really fast and it doesn't last very long. And that's where sometimes thoughts turn into thinking. When you get a thought through this process of conscious living, then that thought comes in as like an aha moment, or it's inspired. As opposed to somebody who's living by default, because what they do is they just react to the situation. They don't get an inspired thought or a sign to take action. Now, this is where manifestation happens. Your thought actually turns into words or action, or sometimes both. So now we have physical manifestation. It could be that $100,000 you've been asking for, or maybe closing that deal with a client at work. Now this conscious person is getting everything they wanted because they're in sync with their desires. Once that happens, they're going to have new experiences. Once you have a new experience, now you're going to start having some contrast. Contrast meaning that there might be some things that you might not like, or that you might want to change. All that leads is to asking, and asking leads to new desires. And now you come full circle, and the process repeats again. But this time, now you have a new stored desire. And that's how you grow, and that's how life grows. Okay, moving on to the next diagram. This one is living life by default. 95% of the people live by default. Kind of hard to believe that only 5% of the people live consciously, but there are some people, a group of people that actually do live in a conscious manner, but they're not fully conscious like the diagram that I showed you before, meaning they don't really understand completely how this system works. But they're still living really good lives, a lot better than somebody who's living totally in by default. Okay, so let's start again from the vortex of desires. The same process plays out. It goes into the universe of the universe organizes it via the law of matching vibrations. And then again, it has to pass through your belief system. And this is where it gets stuck. They get stuck in a belief system because they're not syncing with the rest of this pattern. The vibration has to match their belief system and what their desires are. And if it's not matching, then it's just pretty much going to stop right there. So when I say stop, it doesn't really, the universe continues to knock on your door no matter what, even if you're rejecting it, even if you have a lot of resistance, but you're just not accepting it. So now, instead of listening to your signs and signals and your inspired thoughts, you're starting to react to the outside world. So now those reactive thoughts are turning into words and action. And sometimes you'll find yourself saying things that you're not supposed to say, or taking action when the timing is wrong. Now, it's not 100% in disarray. So that means that you're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days. And that seems normal, right? However, your good days might be 50% and your bad days might be 40%. And when you live consciously, then you're going to have 90 to 90% good days. And then the other 5 to 10%, you're going to have contrasting moments. But that contrasting moment or moments are not going to be extreme like they are when you're living by default. Okay, moving on. So now you have physical manifestation. And because you're reacting to situations, all kinds of things can happen, like arguing, fender benders, you stub your toe, you have a bad day at work. So many unfortunate possibilities. But then again, not every day is going to be like this when you're living by default. But since you have a choice, why live like this where you can live consciously and not have so many problems? Now you're going to have a new experience, just like the conscious person does. But the big difference here is, what are you going to do with that experience? People that live by default, when they have contrasting moments, they blame, they judge, they criticize, they complain, as opposed to learning from your experience. Okay, so you're still asking, everybody asks, either when you're living by default or consciously, you're still asking. I mean, that's just the nature of how we are. If we didn't ask, our species would just cease to survive. That's asking is part of our survival. The only problem here is when you're living by default, your asking is different than somebody who's living consciously. So some of the asking is still filtered back into your vortex of desires. Because you're not learning from your experience, then the majority of that energy is filtered back into the five sensory world, the physical world. The universe still organizes events, even if you're living by default. However, living by default means that you are living in the five sensory world mostly, and you're reacting to what's going on in this physical world. That means the universe is going to organize events according to the vibrations that you're taking in from the physical world. And all those things, the arguing, the fender bender, the stub toe, all that stuff are lower vibrations. And so therefore you're going to attract in your life according to those vibrations. That's why most people seem to live the same day over and over again. Okay, so I put in the circle here because this is somebody who's living by default. They're going to be focusing on this area primarily. And that's manifesting 100% by default. 100% by the material world. Correction, not 100% by the material world, but 100% from the material world. Now you have a basic idea of how manifestation happens, living life by default and living life consciously. So you can see the obvious difference. But believe me when I tell you this, that if you learn how to live life consciously, your entire life will change tremendously for the better. So hopefully I explain this so you can understand it. And again, I'm going to put out more videos on more detail on each one of these nodes, and there's a lot more. There's so much more information. The reason why it can be difficult is because we have so much programming, and we're just going to have to get past that programming. So hopefully I can help you with that. Okay, so thanks for listening and thanks for watching. See you next time.